Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So once again, it is time for one of my favorite elements of the game. A new challenge tournament has come to light, and it is going to be epics only, specifically in the Dragon's Lair. Now, this particular tournament is a repeat. We have seen it in the past, and to be more specific, last July, and it was the same thing, epics only dragon. So with that in mind, I do anticipate that we're going to see more iterations, epics only Fire Knight, epics only Spider, etc., and all that stuff. We saw all 4 of the dungeons the last time we had this iteration, but in this particular case we do have a different offering in terms of the rewards. The theme, I guess, is red things. So we have gems, you have Immortal Soulstone, you have I guess 3/10 of a Primal Shard, and then the kind of the juicy thing here at the top is an Immortal Soulstone. So there's no Void Shard, there's no Prism stuff, but I do think it's worth pursuing going out here for an Immortal Soulstone. I think it happens to coincide with the boosted rates going on right now in the Altar of Souls. So that kind of helps. If you can knock this out in the next day or so, then you could potentially get something really cool, a good 5-star, 6-star, whatever. But if all else fails, if you have a relatively easy group, you can fall back on the fact that taking first place, second place can get you some 6-star relentless gear. Now with that said, keep in mind that an easy group might be hard to come by when it comes to this tournament, because it is the Dragon's Lair after all, which is objectively speaking one of the easiest dungeons to clear regardless of level across the board, and having to use epics only does not make it impossible comparatively speaking. So just keep that in mind, but nonetheless do check your group to see if a lot of people aren't participating, because you could walk away with some extra rewards on top of potentially getting yourself an Immortal Soulstone. Now hopping over to the dungeon itself, I do have a couple of teams to share with you guys. One of them is actually a hard mode stage 10 team, but we'll come back to that a bit later, because if you can't do hard mode, it's too difficult, your gear's not up to par, your champions are not up to par, it's hard to survive, etc., then there is absolutely no shame in dropping down to do normal mode, stage 25, stage 20, stuff like that. You still get the best gear quality from stage 25, you still get the best efficiency points per energy spent on stage 20, and if all else fails, you're in the early game, mid game, stage 16, it's just easier, it's void affinity, don't have to worry about bad affinity matchups. But if you want the bestest gear, so to speak, then hard mode stage 10 is the way to go, and a step below that would be hard mode stage 6. The main thing you want to think about is your capabilities, of course, within your roster, but also what you're looking to get from the dungeon. So if you just want to get it done as quickly as possible using the least amount of energy possible, then normal mode stage 20 is the best way to go. But keep in mind there is a 3x on speed gear, which is highly desirable for a lot of people in the game, myself included. And so for me, trying to get the best gear possible, i.e. running stage hard mode 10, is more optimal for me and my particular goals, because if I do happen to get some 6-star mythical, 6-star legendary quad speed roll or something crazy like that, that would be great compared to getting it in the 5-star epic equivalent on stage 20, just because the odds of getting 6-star stuff is a little bit lower. But anyways, let's jump into the team showcases here. The first team I have to share for you is for normal mode stage 25, and honestly I made this team a lot different than I usually do, just because I want to show how easy, relatively speaking, Dragon can be. So the real win condition here is, of course, Uragrim. We're using him as our poison champion, but this could be anyone on your roster who has some form of poisons and or healing. Then we have a debuffer. I'm using Stagnite for the sake of the affinity matchup. He brings decreased defense and decreased attack, but this could be any debuffer. Could be Deacon Armstrong if you want to go with a bit more of an aggressive team. And then we have 3 DPS. I just threw in Genbo. He's like one of my arena nukers. I threw in Lady Arash because she hits fairly hard. No one really talks about her. But again, these are just proxies for however you want to deal with the waves. You can bring in a more powerful nuker. You can bring in a seer. You can bring in anything like that. And you can go that route. Or you can just bring in, more poisoners to poison the waves down, HP burn to burn the waves, etc. And then Husk is in there, a little bit of stun, a little bit of CC potential for the waves, but it's not really that mandatory. It doesn't matter if the enemies get turns. And of course, the big enemy max HP smack from the A2. So let's go ahead and see this team in action. And I'll talk a little bit about the AI overrides as we go through this. For those of you who are familiar with my style of team compositions, my default for any and all debuffers is the opener don't use when it comes to their debuffing abilities. So Stagnite here is opener don't use on the decreased defense and decreased attack. That way it's available in between waves as we go through it. Uragrim also has opener don't use on the poison ability. I don't want to waste it when there's, when they have a sliver of health left, compared to having it ready to go for the next wave. But in this case, our DPSs, our 3 DPSs, are allowed to spam their abilities as much as they see fit. So they have a couple of AoE attacks, AoE attack there, and then Genbo is probably going to use his AoE attack attack here as well. And that's fine because we're a lot faster than the enemy wave, so we're going to cycle a lot through our abilities a lot quicker than they are. But there you can see a little bit more of the opener don't use settings there on the Urgrim and the Stag Knight. But yeah, rinse and repeat from wave 1. Basically do the same thing. Again, it doesn't really matter if they do happen to get turns. We got lucky there with a quad stun, which is really unlikely because Husk's stun chance is not that high. I think it's like 50-60%, but right, we'll take it. But yeah, he's a form of soft CC. It's not 100% chance, but it can land, and it can just let us take a little bit less damage. But we take a lot less damage inherently just because the enemy waves have decreased attack and decreased defense. So no matter what their damage basis is, they're going to be dealing less damage. And then if need be, Urgrim does have the spot heal in his kit, but he doesn't really have to use it in most cases, because if they get a turn, they're stunned or provoked in most cases, or they are taking a lot of damage from the poisons. But there you go, about 90 seconds or so to get through the waves. And then this is kind of the important bit where we just try to whittle down the dragon. So it's not going to be the fastest run. This team isn't optimized for the fastest clear. The thing I wanted to showcase here is more that it doesn't really matter all that much as long as you have some poisoner. In this case, we only have one. You can run enemy max HP champions like a Royal Guard, depending on the affinity of the boss or the stage you're running. You can run Husk, and then, you know, arena nukers can work as well as for wave DPS, as well as doing some damage on the boss. It's not that essential to have, you know, the strongest champions necessarily to get a clear done. They can get it done in any amount of time, and it's not the end of the world. So here we go. 2 minutes in, kind of working our way through. We can see that we're cycling through. Urgrim does provide a little bit of healing as well, which is pretty handy. And I think Husk has gotten like 2 enemy max HP hits off 400k each, which is pretty decent. But yeah, like I said, this is not going to be the fastest team. Usually, or my test runs were somewhere in the 2 minute to 3 minute range. So it looks like this is going to be around, 2.5 minutes or so. So the main takeaway here is that you can use some sort of team to get through the waves. In this case, we went with a trifecta of DPS with a little bit of CC. A debuffer is definitely paramount to maximize the amount of damage you can do against the boss as well as the waves. And then you're probably going to want some form of poison just because that's the way the dragon works. You cannot reduce his turn meter, and he's immune to decreased speed. And so a very consistent and reliable form of damage is to stack him with poison, so when he inevitably gets his turns, he takes a lot of damage from said poisons. So now let's swap over to the team that I'm actually going to be running for the sake of the tournament. We still have Urgrim in there for the same exact role. He is our primary poisoner, but in this case we're adding in a secondary poisoner with a Kemptum in the mix. He has a lot of poisons on his A1, but he also gets a lot of extra wave DPS damage from his passive, synergizing with the Hex that he places in his kit. We have Dark Kael in the mix because he can place poisons as well with his A3, but more importantly, he can pop poisons with his A1, and I guess most importantly, he brings decreased attack for the squad, so the dragon will do a lot less damage when we get to him. Ugo's in there because she is filling the debuff role. She also has a cleanse heal in her kit, a mini cleanse, and a heal in her kit, so it's a little bit of survivability for the squad. But most importantly, she's bringing block buffs, so once we get to the dragon, he will not be able to place increased attack on himself, which again helps us take less damage. And then we have Rectored Wrath closing out the squad because we want a little bit of insurance that the team will actually survive till the end, so she's our healer reviver in case anything goes wrong. So let's go ahead and super raid this. We just happen to get 40 energy right here, and let's see this team in action. And I will once again talk a little bit about the AI overrides. Urgrim is exactly the same as before. Opener don't use on the AoE poison ability. I have a Kemptum doing opener don't use on the Hex placing ability right there, but once we get to wave 2, I allow him to use it as much as he wants because we don't need that ability on the boss because his passive doesn't work because there's only one enemy, so it doesn't really matter. Opener don't use again on Ugo as well because we do want the debuffing out there at the start, but we don't necessarily need it, or we don't want to waste it in between the waves. And then similarly, opener don't use on Dark Kael for his decreased attack, but also the debuff extension ability. I'll go through the builds of the champions after the runs here, but note that I am turning off Dark Kael's A3 for the waves just because it's single target, so he doesn't really need to place it on, I mean, I guess you could screw over that one person with with the poison sensitivity and the poisons, but in this case AoE poisons is fine. And as you notice there with another synergy with the Kemptum and his passive is that he can debuff spread, and so since there's a lot of poisons already out there, he has a really high chance of spreading poisons to other people. And then you can see his passive when you pop poisons on one person, it can activate on other people. In combination, that for some reason it works with Giant Slayer as well, and so you get a lot of extra hits just by placing out the hexes and also placing out some poison. So lots of good synergy across this squad here. And yeah, about a minute or so between or for each of the waves, as we'll kind of see. This wave is a little bit less efficient, so to speak, just because you'll note that we are not running any control champions, so they will get turns and they will do things. But again, we have the duo healing, or the healing duo of Ugo and Rector Wrath, so we don't really have to worry about that. And again, if anyone happens to die, then we can pick them back up with Rector. And I guess I'll mention that just for the sake of efficiency, I turned off Rector's heal ability for the waves, just because no one realistically gets low enough for that to really matter. But if they do happen to die, which is really unlikely, you see the spot heal from Urgrim there. But if anyone does happen to die, Rector Wrath can still pick them up, so that is available to be used whenever. But the odds of that are very, very low, again, because we do have decreased attack across the entire enemy team. And then Ugo, again, is kind of healing whenever she can. So about 2 minutes or so. Again, a little bit of bad RNG here, just a little bit longer. We didn't spread as many poisons as some of the other runs that I've tested here, but that's just you know, how the cookie crumbles sometimes. So we should be able to kill this last Venus here in a few seconds once Dark Hell gets a turn. There you go. So about 2.5 minutes on that one, a little bit slower, but this is kind of the important bit. So we're starting it off the same. We have a lot of poisons, bad RNG there. We didn't get decreased defense, but again, our primary mode is actually using poison, so that's not as big of a deal. But you'll note here that we kind of flip things around. You might think that I would lead off with Dark Hell's A3 to place the poisons, but for the safety of the run, we're actually leading off with the A2 to start off by having ideally decreased defense, block buffs, and then decreased attack. And then once that table is set, then I allow him to do his poison abilities and just kind of stack as many poisons as possible. As whenever the dragon goes, you can see big chunk of damage there, and we kind of just rinse and repeat that a few times, and then we basically don't really have to worry about anyone dying. That's kind of the goal here, is that there is the failsafe of Rector once again can pick people up if they do happen to die, but this team is designed such that, you know, outside of 3% resistance here and there, most of the time we're not taking that much damage. We are taking the poisons, but we're not taking enough damage to realistically have people die outside of the, again, 3% chance of debuffs to get resisted. So once the dragon takes his last turn here, he should fall right over because he has a bunch of poison stacked up on him. And yeah, again, a little bit of bad RNG there on wave 2. We got the revive or the heal from Cardinal, stuff like that, but at 3.5 minutes, somewhere between 3 minutes and 4 minutes is how long this team takes, and that is totally fine. It is once again epics only, so there is some concession there to be meant or to be taken there in terms of the speed of the run, but we're going for success rate here, not necessarily the fastest possible clear. So we're not trying to be greedy, we're just trying to be successful. So now, as promised, let's go through the builds on these champions, and I will note that there is a caveat here that a lot of my epics are going to be empowered and awakened and all that stuff, but that's not paramount to the success of the run. That does make them deal more damage, does make them a lot more survivable when they're taking damage, stuff like that, but all that equates to typically is more speed in the run, not necessarily a higher success rate. The team around the nukers in particular is designed to keep them alive with their abilities, not necessarily with their stats. So running through the builds here, we have my Genbo the Dishonored, who's in my arena build with the Savage set and one piece of Merciless for the extra attack. His total stats are as follows: 6,800 on the attack, 40,000 on the HP, 230-ish on the speed, 70% crit rate because of course he gives himself increased crit rate, and then 272 on the crit damage. Again, this is just built for arena. In terms of the blessing, I went with Heaven Cast. He puts buffs on himself, and typically I run him with someone who places increased attack, so he just does a little bit more damage with the more buffs that are on him. It's only 2-star, so it's not that substantial. And then for the mastery, it's pretty standard nuker stuff. He is kind of my like speed farming, quick farming arena team, my standard cleave team with a Madame Ceres and an Arbiter and and stuff like that. So he's designed to do, you know, one hit, wipe the enemy team, move on, a quick 7-second kill on a team. So offense tree, and then we're coming down to Helm Smasher, of course, to ignore as much defense as possible, and then the defense tree making the Z pattern down to Retribution for a little bit of counterattacking if he happens to get hit. Next up, we have Lady Eresh, who's probably a champion you have not seen that much of, but I wanted to showcase that you don't need the most powerful nukers necessarily in the game to clear some waves. So she is definitely built for the Cursed City, so you can see the quality of the gear is a little bit lower, and then also a lot of it's not even maxed out. It's a lot of it's sitting at 15. But she is in Cruel, critical crit rate, and Perception, so nothing really fancy here, no savage, nothing crazy, but nonetheless she did a decent amount of damage for the waves, and the stats are a lot worse as you might expect because she's not, you know, arena prioritized. 4,800 on the attack, 37,000 on the HP, 221 on the speed, full crit rate, 224 on the crit damage. Don't really care about the accuracy or resist. Same thing when it comes to Genbo. And then for the blessing on her, I just went with Crushing Rend. Ideally, she'd be 6-star at some point if I happen to get lucky from Soulstones, but until that day comes, she's just going to be at the 3-star level. So the first hit does something. And then, as I hinted at, because she's a Curse City champion, no masteries at all whatsoever. Next up, we have my Husk, who's in a Relentless set with some Perception, and I do actively use this one, this champion. In this case, he is used on my Nightmare Hydra team. And then his total stats are as follows: 75,000 on the HP, 3,000 on the defense, 238 on the speed, full crit rate, 244 on the crit damage, and then around 400 on the accuracy, which is enough to land his Provokes against the Head of Decay for a Nightmare level of Hydra. When it comes to the blessing, similar to Lady Arash, I'm hoping that he can become 6-star eventually, but we're taking advantage of the ignore defense from Crushing Rend. Obviously, he doesn't really do much after the initial hit, but 6-star might change that if it happens to pop out of a Soulstone in the future. And then when it comes to the masteries, pretty standard kind of, a PvE DPS masteries here. We're hugging the left-hand side of the offense tree, coming down to War Master, and then we're picking up some of the stuff here on the defense tree. And I should probably at some point come down and finish them out to get Retribution, because every once in a while he probably does get a big smack in Hydra, and it'd be nice to get a free counterattack for maybe extra War Master hits. So a little bit of inefficiency on my part there. The next up, we have Stag Knight, one of the best debuffer epics in the entirety of the game, who's in a shield set with Immortal. This is more for like Curse City at this point, Faction Wars type of build, so that's why he's in there. Just a big shield to protect the team and heal himself a little bit with the Immortal, but also boosting the size of the shield. When it comes to his stats, 69,000 on the HP, 3,300 on the defense, 264 on the speed, so on the quicker side, and then 481 on the accuracy, which is definitely overkill. For hard mode dungeons, you only need about 350. For normal mode, you only need upwards of 250. So it's overkill. I forget why I built him with this much accuracy, but I haven't had a reason to steal the gear for anyone else, so that's just where he sits. And then, as I like to do with a lot of my debuffers, they have cruelty on them because they already lower their defense with their active ability, so I like to have double down on that aspect with their blessing. Then for the masteries, pretty standard debuffer setup here. Left hand side of the offense tree coming all the way down, landing it to War Master, and then the support tree right hand side picking up everything ending on Sniper and Master Hexer. Next up, we have our primary poisoner, and that is Uragrim, who's in, believe it or not, a Stalwart set. So that is designed to have him just be a little bit more survivable once we get to the dragon. It is hard mode after all, or he's tuned for hard mode so that he doesn't get swatted away by big AoEs or occasional big crit. Or again, if we get bad RNG, we don't get block buffs from Ugo by chance, or we don't get decreased attack from Dark Kale, he's not just going to fall over when the dragon takes a big AoE smack. So Perception alongside that, and then the Supersonic for a little bit of extra resistance by happenstance. Total stats here, 60,000 on the HP, 3,400 on the defense, 273 on the speed, and then he is built to have high resistance and high accuracy. So high resistance so that the dragon cannot poison him or place any debuffs, but also 340 accuracy so that he can place his poisons against the dragon. When it comes to the blessing, I opted for a Commanding Presence. It just makes his aura a bit stronger, but honestly, I might just change this over to Nourish because he does place some continuous heals, and this will make them heal 10% more than they usually do. I don't really care about the restoration of destroyed max HP in this particular case, but this would just allow his heals to do a little bit more healing, which is just beneficial for the team overall. Then when it comes to the masteries, we're kind of indexing into the fact that he doesn't really deal any damage, or supporting the fact that he does the poisons as well as the continuous heals. So the support tree, we're kind of getting a lot of the healing boosting stuff, which does in fact affect continuous heals, believe it or not, and we're ending with the kind of Y split of lasting gifts and Master Hexer to take advantage of his buffs and his debuffs. And the defense tree, we're making this nice crescent moon from the resistance all the way down to unshakable for the extra resistance, so that he has the stats in order to do what we talked about, resisting the dragon's debuffs. Next up, we have Dark Kale, who's in Relentless and Retaliation, which is really fun. You might have seen that proc a few times here and there, but it's just kind of a little bit of extra efficiency so that when the dragon hits us with one of his many AoEs, there's a chance that he can just randomly counterattack and pop some more poisons, thus making the run faster. That's the logic, at least, behind that. Total stats here, 53,000 on the HP, 3.1k on the attack, 2,500 on the defense, 242 on the speed, full crit rate, that is to make sure that his A2 does actually extend the duration of debuffs, and then 352 on the accuracy, again, what we need for hard mode level of dungeons. For the blessing, I opted for cruelty just because he does have a triple hitter on the A1, so he does end up hitting the boss a lot, and so once we do that, it makes it really, really easy to stack up the cruelty stacks. A little bit of anti-synergy with stack stagnant in the team, but they're not usually optimized on the exact same squads. And then in terms of the masteries here, we have once again a pretty standard debuffer set of things. The support tree hug on the right hand side, sniper, master hexer, and the offense tree, same thing, but we're making these swing back over to Giant Slayer because of course he has a triple hitter on his A1. Next up, we have one of our primary DPSs for the waves, and that is a Kemptum for the hard mode team. At least he's in a lifesteal set, one of the probably the only champion on my account in a lifesteal set, but it's just to keep him alive because anytime his passive procs, he gets a lot of hits on the enemies, and that's every time he does that is a chance for a Giant Slayer proc to heal him up with the lifesteal. But I digress. Total stats here: 50,000 on the HP, 3,700 on the attack, 2,200 on the defense, 247 on the speed, full crit rate, 135 on the crit damage, so he can hit a little bit, but it's nothing crazy. And then once again, same accuracy, 346, enough for hard mode dungeons. For the blessing, once again, we're going with cruelty, but in this case, triple hitter on the A1, triple hitter on the A2, and so it just makes sense. He stacks it up pretty quickly. Again, there's a lot of overlapping synergy here, but these champions typically are not on the same squad. This is just happenstance. For the masteries here, you can see that we kind of started going down the standard debuffer route. He's not in any of my main teams, and I didn't finish his masteries before he came out of said teams, and so I just didn't finish it, but I would still end with the sniper here and master hexer for the standard debuffer stuff on the support tree, and the offense tree basically the same as Dark Kales. I'd probably come down for methodical because he's going to be spamming his A1 a lot, but he already has Giant Slayer as you'd expect for all of the triple hitters. Rector Wrath is in a speed set with some reflex on, that is to reduce the cooldown of her healing and reviving ability as needed. Total stats here are as follows: 68,000 on the HP, 3,500 on the defense, 302 on the speed. So she's quite fast, but a lot of that is the empowerment and the blessing and the fact, all that extra stuff that kind of adds to it. So don't get twisted on her stats there. But 567 on the resistance. Once again, this is overkill for the sake of the dungeon. 450 would suffice, but I do use her sometimes as a flex healer reviver in the arena, so she's built with as high resistance as is reasonable. When it comes to the blessing, this is optimized for Hydra with miracle heal, so that whenever she does her heal, it is 100% chance because she is 6-star. Got lucky with that from a soul stone at least, and she can restore destroyed max HP, which helps combat the head of decay. And then for the masteries, we're indexing a little bit more into the resistance, so we're coming down to unshakable in the defense tree, but we're also coming and getting improved parry, take a little bit less damage, and then solidarity because she is providing a lot of buffs for the team, so she gets a little bit more resistance from that. And then the support tree, as you'd expect, picking up a lot of the healing stuff on the left hand side. We're banking over to Lord's Jill for the extra speed because I did plan to build her in a speed set, and then we're coming back over to lasting gifts, of course, to extend the heals and the veils and whatnot in her kit. And that brings us to the last champion being featured here, and that is Ugo, who has been recently rebuilt. She is now in Affinity Breaker and Merciless, so 4-piece and 4-piece. This is definitely for Hydra clan boss, so whenever we have to deal with the bad affinity matchups, force affinity heads and stuff like that, and or poison cloud, she still has a chance to place her debuffs, decreased defense and block buffs through weak hits. So total stats on her are as follows: 84,000 on the HP, 3,600 on the defense, 268 on the speed, and 520 more, there we go, on the accuracy. The accuracy is a lot higher than it needs to be, but this is up there because I did try her out in one of the event dungeons at one time, and so this was around the accuracy we needed for that, and so I haven't really felt the need to drop it down lower, so just left it up there. But yeah, 500-ish accuracy, a lot overkill. Once again, you need around 350 upwards for hard mode dungeons. When it comes to the blessing, same logic as Rector Wrath. I do use her in Hydra once again, so she combats the head of decay a little bit by using the miracle heal blessing. And then for the masteries, once again, standard debuffer style masteries here. Right hand side of the support tree, sniper, master hexer. Left hand side of the offense tree, coming down to war master. Now in terms of other epics that you could use, there's so many epics in the game that do similar things. Epics, generally speaking, are fairly one-dimensional, kind of by design, and so you can really plug and play with whoever you have on your roster who can do a similar role. So I'll just call out a handful. Like Venom Mage is good for AoE poison. The hit reduction makes you take a little bit less damage. My Celiac Priest Ornn is pretty decent, and he has the potential to solo like stage 20 and stuff like that. Mordecai is good if you want to run HP burn alongside the poisons. In terms of debuffers, we showed Stagnite, but Duck the Pierce does something similar: decrease attack, decrease defense. I mentioned Deacon, who's good for kind of turn meter control manipulation, as well as placing the leech and decrease defense. And then Mistrider Dahi, another example of a kind of more of a DPS style debuffer who can place the AoE decrease defense. And then for the supports, Vogoth is a good honorable mention, super tanky, heals your team with his passive. Godseeker Neri is a great healer, cool, amazing revive, as well as an amazing passive. And so you can just kind of plug and play with whoever you have on your roster. It doesn't really need to be these specific champions, but as long as you have some way to kill the waves, you have some way to maximize the damage with a debuffer, and then you have some way to stay alive, that being supports or just having a more aggressive team, whichever one works. So there you have it. That's going to be my free-to-play strategy for the Epics Only Dragon Tournament 2025 edition. Let me know in the comment section down below what team you're going to be running if you're participating, and I do hope you are, because there is a pretty juicy Immortal Soulstone up for grabs, and if you're fortunate, you might get something really, really amazing with the booster rates going on right now over the next couple of days from that particular summon. I also hope that you have a relatively easy group so you have a chance to compete for some of that relentless gear. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit the like button down below. It really does help out the channel, and feel free to hit that subscribe button down below if you want to support the channel and you're enjoying the content overall on the channel. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.